The air, water, earth, and sun awes us. The four awesome forces of nature can provide 1,000 times more energy than we need. You are also awesome. You and me and all Earthkind are the fifth element. We are literally changing the world. Technology is now harnessing nature's awesome power for electricity, heat, and transportation. And the best news is that the clean energy transition can save us money and create a more prosperous, just, beautiful, and sustainable civilization today. Well, welcome to the Awesome Earthkind podcast. And if you would, please let folks know who you are, where do you live, and what kind of work do you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Emily Eckert. I'm the founder and chief vision officer of GoViably. I am in the lovely state of Vermont. I've raised in Connecticut and traveled around lived in Utah for a few years. And there's a big difference between New England and the desert. Turns out the desert was not my cup of tea.
Great. So now you live in Vermont?
I do. Yeah, I
Wonderful.
kind of was poking around to see what state has the least amount of people, and Vermont was on the top of that list.
Yeah, Vermont's a great state. Beautiful stuff. So wonderful. Well, we like to ask folks to share a particular quote. We call it a quantum quote, an inspirational quote that helps frame the conversation and gives people an insight into your mindset. So you have one you care to share?
I do, and I am going to read it off so I don't mess up the wording, but it's a quote by Elon Musk. We are running the most dangerous experiment in history right now, which is to see how much carbon dioxide the atmosphere can handle before there is an environmental catastrophe.
Wow. Great quote. We're seeing catastrophe as the catastrophe almost every day these days. So more extreme weather events and yep. So, okay, well, we're going to talk about all the kinds of work you do, but we like to start with why. Why do you do what you do, Emily?
That is such a great question. Why do I have somehow come to the conclusion that it is my mission to help with resiliency and sustainability, and how can we decrease our carbon impact? And let me kind of go bigger picture, not just carbon impact, but sustainability as a whole, because carbon impact is just one portion of sustainability, right? I was actually adopted. I was adopted from India. And so oftentimes I'm thinking to myself, there are so many children at that time and even now that need families, that need support, that need love. And somehow I was the one that was chosen and was raised in a family that gave me those opportunities and gave me that love. And so I'm thinking, why me? What can I do to basically to make sure that the choice of me being adopted was worth it? Right? And I don't have any kids of my own, but I have friends and family, and they're like my own kids. And I look at their kids growing up in next generations, and I look around, and I mentioned living in Vermont, such a beautiful state. The desert in Utah is actually beautiful as well, and so are the mountains. And so I look around and see the beauty and want to make sure that others can experience the same, whether it's the generations that are currently alive and growing up or generations that haven't even been born yet. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. If you would, tell us about GoViably and what you're all about and what type of activities you guys do and promote.
Sure. GoViably, really the big mission is 10 years from now that every product and company or organization is by default socially and environmentally responsible. So when I say sustainability, oftentimes I kind of use it interchangeably with social and environmental responsibility. Kind of go hand in hand. They're a little bit of a mouthful. So GoViably is looking at how can we make that happen. The Googles and the Apples of the world, they have the resources to transform the way they operate. and to put pressure and transform their supply chains. But most of the economy still runs on small and medium-sized businesses, right? That when we look at the percentage of large corporations versus small and medium-sized businesses, they still take up a lot of that space, and they don't have all those resources. So GoViably is focused on solutions that are achievable and tools that small and medium-sized businesses can use. So we kind of have three different compartments. We have our consulting services, we have our reporting and sustainability assessments team, and then we're going to bring it all together through a marketplace that actually connects these businesses and products that are sustainability oriented and are socially and environmentally responsible, and connects them to buyers, to consumers like you and I, who want to make an impact with where we spend our money. But right now there really isn't a one-stop shop of pre-vetted products where we can go. There's a couple out there, but they're limited. And so we're looking at expanding that access to sustainability.
Great. So what do you see as the forces that are driving sustainability practices, and what's the whole mindset behind sustainability?
The force, it's interesting because the force is concerned citizens and consumerism. I know the word consumerism, some people don't like using it. Sometimes people don't like kind of the aura around the word consumerism. But we do need to face reality, which is we live in a time where consumerism is kind of front and center, right? We've transitioned from a mindset of I buy things once and I need them and I repair them and they last as long as they can last. And we've transitioned now to living, at least in the developed countries, where we buy something because it's cheaper up front. If I have to buy one in the next 2 years, that's fine, instead of spending a little bit more and know that that product will last them for another 10 years. So when you look at consuming products, there's always that saying of the best waste management is avoiding creating the waste to begin with, right? So the less we have to consume, the better. The mindset has to do with sustainability and climate change and the future of the environment. For most people, it is not tangible. That's the challenge with the mindset. If I tell you that, the effects of deforestation are going to be felt worldwide, right now, the only tangible effects are people who are actually living around these areas or in the rainforest that are being destroyed. But most people, you and I, are sitting in our home and we don't have a rainforest around us, right? So it's an intangible challenge. And I think when it comes to the mindset, that's part of it, is every one of us has an impact. It's up to us whether that impact is negative or positive. Again, I love this. I love saying this because it's so important that every one of us will have an impact. And so I'm repeating it because it's so important, because it's up to us whether that impact is a negative one or positive one. And whether it is our immediate family or friends or surroundings that are being impacted, that's one thing, but that's typically what we envision. We forget about that impact that's beyond our eyesight physically and what's the other word I'm looking for? I don't remember the word now. Physically, what we see beyond our eyes, as well as the not hypothetically, but oh my goodness, in 10 minutes, this word is going to come back to me. The point is, oftentimes we don't think about the impacts that we don't see. I don't see the impact of buying a notebook if it's not recycled paper. I don't see that impact of what tree was cut down to produce that paper, and what forest that tree comes from, and what animals' homes were destroyed while that tree was being cut down. So I think the mindset around sustainability has a lot to do with, let's think beyond what we can see. Let's think about, even though it seems like our decisions and actions don't make a difference. They really do, because people are observing what we're doing all the time. They may not tell us, and we may not know, but just when you don't think somebody's paying attention, somebody's paying attention. Again, whether it's friends, family, coworkers, they don't need to say they're paying attention, but they're seeing your actions. They're seeing what you're doing.
So, yeah, I mean, your point is really well taken. At one point, it's really hard for people to envision that, okay, I'm burning fossil fuels to heat my home. I'm burning fossil fuels every time I get in the car or travel anywhere. I'm burning fossil fuels, usually depending upon my electric source, every time I turn on the light or sign up on a computer or do whatever I'm doing with my electricity. So you're right. I mean, people don't necessarily see those results and those impacts right up front. And is that part of your goal, is to kind of increase people's awareness about the impacts that they're having, and how are you going to do that?
Yes, so there's a really interesting term that has been around for over 30 years, is greenwashing. And so to your point of how are you going to do that, transparency needs to counteract the greenwashing concept. So greenwashing essentially means giving off the appearance that you're doing something sustainable or socially and environmentally responsible, but not having the actual actions to back that appearance up, to support it. So to counteract greenwashing, and there are companies that are doing that. There are companies that, even if you think of, we have 30 different product lines, only one of which is sustainable. You're not offsetting the production and the manufacturing and the carbon emissions of 29 product lines just by having one sustainable product line, right? Or in the marketing, this is kind of where it really came about, is during the marketing aspect of a business. Companies have realized that people are looking for sustainable products. That's the interesting thing here. Companies realize that people actually want socially and environmentally responsible products. So they started pretending or giving off the appearance that that's what they are, that they are being sustainable, when in reality they didn't change anything on their operation. They only changed the marketing. And it can be a person too. It doesn't have to be a company. It can be a person that's pretending to be sustainable, but don't actually live the lifestyle of a sustainable person. So to counteract that, it's all about transparency. It's all about showing, not just, especially for your business, not just the commitments that you're making, but what steps are you taking to achieve those commitments? So oftentimes we hear, especially right now around COP26, Conference of the Parties 26, talking about goals, by 2030 and by 2050. And we need to make sure that there's actual concrete steps that are being taken, because the next 10 years really are crucial in the trajectory of our planet and the future. And the planet will be around even without us. One of my inspirational or influential people in my life is Sir David Attenborough, and I've watched several of his documentaries and interviews, and he reminded me that the planet is always going to be here. It's humanity that may not be here. So that puts a little bit of a different perspective on it.
Yeah, so the challenge, I think, is that there's over 7 billion, almost 8 billion of us now, and we're having such a dramatic impact on the environment. Recently, I came across a statistic from Climate Reality that James Hansen, the NASA scientist who's been dealing with climate issues for a long time, calculated that the amount of greenhouse gases we've got in the environment now, the impact is the same every day as though we're exploding 500,000 nuclear weapons every day, 365 days a year. That's how much energy is being captured in the atmosphere from the greenhouse gases humanity, you and me, all people on Earth, all Earthkind has created. So yeah, the impact is really dramatic. And then the question becomes, though, look, there's nobody that's really living sustainably. You can't live on this planet today, no matter how clean and green you are, unless you're out in the woods just eating some nuts and berries and living off the land, as they say in the ancient indigenous ways. And even then, it's not really sustainable, because we can't do that for 8 billion people. So how do you deal with the fact that we're all on the spectrum, we're all at various points of sustainability, sustainability and have people feeling like they can be empowered to take their next step, as opposed to, hey, that person is at risk and they're not doing enough, and this person is bad and I'm good, or whatever else. I mean, how do you counter that?
The more sustainable somebody can be, the better, of course. But every step works. Every step helps, not works. It works as well, but every step helps. So when you're talking to friends, family, coworkers, whoever, the key here is, have you implemented one thing this month? Or have you implemented one thing this quarter? And start building the habits, because it has to do with the sustainability lifestyle. Really has to do about habits. You're tweaking your habits. You're tweaking the habit of what aisle you go to in the grocery store. You're tweaking the habit of your driving habits. Are you driving less during COVID? A lot of people are driving less. If you're driving less, are you taking the most efficient route to get to work, right? If you are under non-COVID circumstances, are you carpooling? Are you using public transportation? Now we have a new product that's littering the world as well, which is masks. Are you disposing of your masks correctly when you're done using them? And so if we can empower everybody to just make one change every, let's say, 3 months, adopt a new habit that's more sustainable. Eventually we will all get there. And so it's combining the forces of us as individuals and our lifestyles, and then also having more solutions, excuse me, for the businesses to provide more sustainable products. So if you are a business that sells antibacterial gel, right? What is the bottle that you're using to put that gel in? Are you thinking about the labor force, the workforce? When I talk about social and environmental responsibility, also talking about diversity and equity, right? It's interchangeable. And so how can we help these businesses improve that situation? I'm going to put myself on mute for a moment. Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. So how do you see this future of sustainability? How do you see it evolving?
I see the electric vehicle transition is a good example. I see the hesitation with a lot of people is also the technical aspect of products. For example, looking at weed whackers or weed eaters, or there's like 3 different names for the yard tool for weed whackers. The string that is used is oftentimes plastic. So as you're weed whacking, pieces of that plastic will fall off, and then they just end up in your yard and don't disintegrate until who knows when. So we have tested out a more natural, a biofilm or bioplastic type of polymer to use for that string. There is one company that does it. And the conclusion was it seemed to break more often. So the evolution of this is a combination of the green tech sector, which it's in the front lines a lot right now, is there's more technology regarding alternative materials as well as renewable resources, and then a convergence of those habits that I was referring to. So the evolution, I think, needs to be this combination of the two, getting us on the right track.
So it's both habits, personality, actions, but then also the technology and adapting the right technology, evolving the right technology. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's mindset, and then it's technology, and it's our actions from the mindset. So interesting, fascinating. And so GoViably is going to be doing what? You're going to be setting in place a ranking scale. Obviously, you're going to have products in a marketplace, but in addition on helping companies, small and medium, get to where they want to be or need to be, how's that going to work?
Yeah, right now we do have the kind of a version 1 prototype of our sustainability certification. It assesses the business as a whole, and it's at a pass or fail system right now. What we're doing over the course of the next 4 months or so is developing a scoring system. And the reason that takes long is because each specific aspect or category is weighted differently. It's also weighted differently depending on, let's say, where you're located. Here in Vermont, the largest utility is now 100% carbon free, Green Mountain Power. If you live in another state, most of your electricity production might still be coming from fossil fuel sources. So it's really looking at that transparency piece to make sure that when we create our sustainability certification, it's done in a way where it's simple and succinct enough for the business to complete it, because we don't want it to be a barrier to entry. We want businesses to see this as a tool. And at the same time, for the consumer side, to make sure that we're covering all the important aspects that we need to, because it's critical that we avoid the brainwashing. We want to make sure that we're avoiding that.
Great. So you've been working kind of in the field for a number of years. What kind of lessons, what kind of challenges have you had? What lessons have you learned? And what are you doing differently now than you thought you'd be doing?
A lot of my lessons and challenges have been from speaking to people, more so than just myself, because I don't have a brick and mortar business. We're all virtual. The whole team is scattered around. And so we've come up during COVID in a virtual atmosphere. But speaking to a lot of business owners who have brick and mortar businesses, and again, bring it back to that small and medium sized business structure, oftentimes even the owners are so involved in the everyday operations that they don't have the time to remove themselves and think about the big picture. They're very concerned of, are we making payroll this month? And these things have just gotten highlighted and exploded and came to the forefront because of COVID, as we know, right? Now more than ever, can we make payroll? Can we make sure that we have the supplies that we need? Can we be open the same length of hours, the same number of hours as we were before? And instead of the leaders in the company being able to say, all right, let's look at the big picture, because not only are we concerned about thriving now, but we want the business to thrive in the next 5 or 10 years. And if we don't set ourselves apart, if we don't become sustainable, customers will start choosing different businesses, and then they may die out, for lack of better terms, right? So the challenges I see are, let's face it, there's no sugarcoating it. Money is always a factor. Money is always a factor. There will be a transitional period. What I mean by transitional period is, if you look at, let's say a heating system of a building. A heating system now, maybe it's heated through propane. Maybe that heating system was installed 2 years ago. For a business, it may not be financially feasible to replace something that they just purchased 2 years ago. And so there's this transition period of equipment that's existing, that's operating, and then we need to make sure that we catch businesses when it's time to replace things. And that time, that's a revolving process. There's always some business that has something that can be replaced, and we just need to make sure that they know what their options are. A challenge is business still don't know what their options are, and they don't know what their options are because they don't make the time to look for those options, and the options aren't coming to them. So challenge 1 is, how do we get the options to go to the business owner? Because the business owner doesn't always have time to go seek out the options, right?
Interesting.
And then same thing on the customer side. It's still sustainability, or sustainable products are still considered kind of a luxury, right? It's not mainstream. So we need to get it to the point where, again, as I said at the beginning, where it's the default. that every product is socially and environmentally sustainable.
Fascinating. So if you would discuss kind of one thing that is relatively unique tip, a tool or a tactic that you think people need to know, but then most folks probably don't. We call it a value supernova, something that's really insightful for folks to think about.
Because I've been in this realm for a long time, so I've been in kind of the energy world, and I'm still seeing that there's a lot of rebates and incentives that are out there to help both businesses and residential customers. And I don't think they think of looking at them. And I think more utilities are getting on that bandwagon. More utilities might be having some requirements to offer something like that. So if your heating system dies out home, reach out and find out if your utility has any support. And then also, this really isn't a unique tip, but it's just conversations. We need to have more conversations about this. It's in the news all the time, but there's no comparison to having a conversation, genuine conversation with somebody that you know, and learning about their perspective and sharing yours and seeing how you can support each other. Because what I've observed is we've reached this point where there's a lot of independent thinking and independent living. And in the end, we are one society on one planet, which is our home. And I know some people might think that's cheesy, but it's the truth. Right? We're all on this planet together. And if this planet, if it can't give us the resources because we've used them all up, then we're all in trouble. And so let's work together and support each other. And instead of saying, shame on you for not doing this or that, we need to say, I understand that that's how you've been taught, but have you ever thought about this idea? Or have you ever tried this? Try this product, try this piece of food, try this different route to get to work. So giving suggestions and having general conversation is really important.
Ah, great. Excellent. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, there's usually a significant number of utility programs out there to help people with electricity, with heating and cooling, and now even with electric vehicles, charging stations. There's grants in many parts of the country. Most states, many municipalities have various different incentives. So always take a look at those. I think that's a great suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Take us to a moment in time where you had a credible insight, an aha moment that kind of changed your perspective on everything, if you would. Tell us the story behind it.
Sure. So I was about 17 years old. At the time, I lived in Mystic, Connecticut, and I worked in an aquarium as an exhibit educator. And although I'm not a huge fan of those type of institutions now, for me, it made a positive impact education-wise. But I remember as an exhibit educator, I would have, my preset spiel about whatever animal that I was talking about to the visitors. And in this particular day, I was talking about the beluga whales. So we had 3 beluga whales there. And I remember finishing that spiel and then thinking to myself, so I'm standing here talking about the conservation of animals, but then I go home and I eat them. And that was my light bulb moment. That was for me, that doesn't make sense. If I love animals so much, why am I eating them? And after that, I started doing more research about the industry in general, which then also sparked research about climate change and carbon, and off I went from there.
Fascinating. Interesting. So are you now a non-meat eater?
Correct.
Aha. Vegan or vegetarian?
Vegan.
Vegan. There we go. Fascinating. Well, good for you. And, I think, again, we're all kind of on the spectrum, so no matter what you do, you're still having an impact. And, but it's always good to know what you're eating and what impact you're having on your environment and what that does. And definitely the humane treatment of animals and the impact of animals on greenhouse gases is very significant and very important. So thank you so much. All right, we're going to enter into the Pulsar round. We're going to ask you a series of questions and look for your short, succinct, amazing, and mind-blowing answers. Are you ready?
As ready as I can be.
There we go. First, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Apparently I wasn't so ready. Best advice I've ever received. Keep smiling.
Keep smiling, definitely, no matter what. Keep a positive attitude. That's a great one. All right, share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Routines. I have a nightly routine because sleep is really important to me. And I like to be clear-headed, and I'm not if I don't get enough sleep. So sleep and a nightly routine is a habit that I believe keeps me going.
Outstanding. Just share an internet resource that you think people should know about.
That's a really tricky one. That's a really tricky one because it's the internet. You can find anything. I would say, I always think National Geographic does an excellent job with the variety of topics that they cover. You're still muted.
Sorry, something happened there. Well, do you have a particular book you'd recommend to people, and why?
Does it have to be sustainable? Excuse
Nope.
me,
It
sustainability.
could be any book at all that you think is important and inspiring to folks.
Okay, one of my favorite books is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes.
Wow.
And I recommend it because it is a challenge these days to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And this book is written as a diary. And so you're reading it from somebody else's perspective. It helps with understanding social responsibility and equity. And so that's one of my favorite books.
Fascinating. Thanks. I read that years ago, and it's definitely a really touching and insightful story. So thank you. All right. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing for everyone in the world, what would it be?
Less fear.
Less fear.
Because there's a connection between the lack of cooperation and fear. The more fearful people are, I think the less likely they are to cooperate. And so if we had less fear and more love, I think that we would cooperate together and drive these solutions and these actions and habits together more.
Yeah, great point. Excellent point is that we fear what we don't understand, and we have this negativity bias built into our biology, and we're always afraid of everybody and anything that's coming at us. And yeah, if there was less fear, boy, wouldn't we be a better society for sure. Wonderful. We call this section the WTF or F section. Weather time fudge, an extreme weather event that you lived through and tell the tale, or weather time fun, the most fun you've ever had, and the type of weather that was at the time. Would you like to pick one and tell us a story? Share a story?
I'll pick the first one, although I did not personally experience it at the time, but I experienced the after effects. Does that count?
Sure.
So my dad lives in Massachusetts, and this was about, this must have been about 10 years ago. They had a tornado go through their town. Luckily, my father lived out on the outside of town, but the tornado went right through the town. And at one point, my boyfriend and I went to help volunteer to clean up some of the homes because there were some homes that were just leveled. And I have never experienced seeing that devastation firsthand until that point. And it is, I didn't even have words to describe it. And there was one woman that came in, we were going to help start clearing out the debris, and she didn't want us to touch anything. And this was within a few days of it happening. So you could still see, and it was palpable that she was still in shock. There was still a lack of full grasp of what had happened, and just not even wanting anything to be touched because she's still processing what's happened. So that to me, and we're seeing, we as in the world is seeing more extreme weather patterns these days, right? So hurricanes and although tornadoes we still are seeing in specific pockets, but we see them more often. There's more often that I will see like a tornado warning in the New England area. But still, that devastation is I mean, a flood can cause that same devastation where you just can't rebuild the house that you already had there. You need to start completely from scratch. You can't renovate it. So to me, that was my experience of this is what nature is really capable of.
Yeah, there's, I mean, this whole section is dedicated to people because almost all of us now have lived through various extreme weather events, and whether it was a flood or a tornado or a hurricane or a wildfire or a microburst or droughts, we're all experiencing this across the board. It's happening more frequently. They're more intense and they're more costly. You know, the United States government has now documented that just a few years ago, we were seeing an average of $1 billion event every month, if you can believe such a thing. That's become commonplace. But now last year it was one almost every 2 months where we saw $22 billion events. And this year Hurricane Ida was over $60 billion worth of damage, and it's just continuing to escalate, and it's going to get worse unless we take the steps that we need to as a civilization to change the amount of greenhouse gases we're emitting and take what's out there back out of the environment and encapsulate it and capture that carbon and take it out, because it's just going to keep getting worse. So, okay. All right. Well, what's one thing you're most energized about today, Emily?
What am I most energized about today? I'm most energized that it was actually sunny. We're in November and it's sunny and beautiful outside.
Yeah, it is very empowering when the sun comes out and we just feel that incredible positive energy from that little ball in the sky that is the biggest nuclear power plant in our section of the universe and can provide 1,000 times more energy than we need. There's no doubt it's very inspiring and energizing. All right. Okay, well, what's your next steps with GoViably?
What's our next steps? Well, we're continuing to create that scoring system for our sustainability certification. But actually what's very exciting, and I'd like to share it today, is that we are going to be hosting a one-day sustainability event, the Viable Future event, on March 3rd, which is a Thursday. And it will be a virtual event. But the goal there will be that every attendee or participant will walk away with concrete action steps. So again, talking about getting away from greenwashing and showing that transparency and helping people realize what tools and resources are out there. So I invite everybody to keep an eye on our website, GoViably.com, and we will be announcing more about the event. But I'm very excited because I want to make it a fun, engaging event. I know people are tired of these Zoom workshops where somebody talks at them for an hour. So we're going to strategize and make it much more engaging instead of having the speakers talk for 60 minutes while everybody else is off their videos and sleeping.
Excellent. Outstanding. All right. Well, grand finale, if you would share a piece of parting advice and the best way for people to connect with you if you'd like them to.
Sure. Piece of parting advice is, you're going to see so many common themes with me, but the piece of parting advice is don't be afraid to try something new. And instead, be grateful that we actually live in a time where most of us, at least in our country, have the ability to try something new and have something new to even try in the first place. Right, so my parting advice is try something new. Don't be afraid to try something new. And if you would like to get a hold of me, probably the best contact for me is email, which is Emily, EMILY, at GoViably.com. GOV like Victor, IA, B like boy, LY.com.
Great. Anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover?
No, but you gave me a fantastic idea as we were talking.
Oh, yeah?
And that idea was, since we're talking about this lack of tangible aspect to climate change, we need like a buddy system where we connect somebody who lives in an area that is currently feeling the effects and experiencing the effects of climate change, and pair them with somebody who doesn't, right? So somebody in, let's say, Vermont, some areas of Vermont, can be paired up with somebody in Texas and share, again, that dialogue, that conversation, share the experiences. So the person in Vermont can really try to understand what it means to feel the effects, because at some point, everywhere is going to feel the effects. So let's share from the places that have already experienced them. So that way we can all try to get a grasp and understanding of this is why we need to avoid that happening everywhere.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Emily Eckert of GoViably.com. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I appreciate you having me. Have a good day.
It's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you for joining us today, awesome Earthkind people. Do you want to increase your climate impact by a factor of 1,000? Then pick up your phone today and call your United States congressional representative and both your U.S. senators and ask them to support the federal Build Back Better bill. Build Back Better will create the largest climate protection action in American history. Because so few people take the time and make the effort, our elected representatives interpret the opinion of everyone who calls or writes as representing the views of 1,000 other citizens. Congress will vote on the Build Back Better bill that aims to get our country to 80% pollution-free electricity by 2030 and cut climate pollution 100% by 2050. The Build Back Better bill provides tax incentives for solar, wind, energy efficiency, electric cars, charging stations, and more. And it will finally cut the subsidies for fossil fuels. It will also drive major investments into communities that have been disproportionately hit by environmental injustice. When you make the calls, spread the word via social media by posting images of a large red exclamation point using the hashtags CodeRedClimate and CodeRedCongress. You'll be joining some of your favorite musicians and celebrities, including the Dave Matthews Band, Dead and Companies, Billie Eilish, Melissa Eldridge, Phineas, Maroon 5, Brittany Howard, John Baptiste, Alex Benjamin, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jane Fonda, Mark Ruffalo, Damien and Stephen Marley, Group Love, Huey Lewis and the News, and many more. When the Build Back Better bill passes, the United States can enter the global climate negotiations on November 1st, with America setting out to cut climate pollution 100% by 2050 and be able to encourage other nations to do the same. If not you, then who? The time is now. Act now, pick up the phone, call your congressional representatives and U.S. senators, and help create a better future for our children and all the 7 billion Earthkind people on the planet. Thank you.